What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Iron Chapel. Today I'm going to show you how to use a bunch of different lifting equipment, including belts, wrist wraps, wrist straps for lifting, and those are some very important ones. And I'll touch on a couple more other ones. There's some that I don't have. I don't have elbow sleeves or wraps. I don't have knee wraps. I don't have any suits for equipped lifting. So I'm just going to go over the typical stuff that is relevant for most lifters. And remember, we have our merch on ironchapel.net, Swole Resurrection pre-workout, which I use every day. I love this product. I made it so that it works to accomplish goals for everybody, and it works well for me. Good glutamine in here to keep you from getting binded up from pre-workout. It works pretty well, no garbage in this. So yeah, merch and pre-workout available on ironchapel.net, also coaching available on ironchapel.net. But let's get right into the video. So we're going to start off with the lifting straps. Now, these are complicated and very confusing for beginners if you're using the loop ones like this, even to just get set up. There's also figure 8 style, which I don't have. Those are mainly for strongmen or elite powerlifting competitors. I don't think they're necessary for most people. So I'm not going to go through those too much, and those are more simple to use. But for the loop straps, I like to orientate it so that the logo or anything on the strap is right side up. Then take it and put this loop through there. So then you have it like that, and the logo should be there, and the strap going that way. And then the other strap should have the logo there upright, and the strap should be going that way. So now what you want to do is turn it around so that the loop is facing you and the loop is going to the right. So you take your right hand with your thumb going that way, put it through, and you want that to follow your thumb that way. And now we could go over to the bar and get it set up. So now to get this set up on the bar, you have the loop, how it should be with it going towards your thumb. Put your hand over the bar how you would normally grab it, and put the strap underneath the bar and loop it around. Grab, you could do one wrap, you could do a few wraps. Now what I like to do is when I'm setting up, I like to do it with one hand. So I'll typically come up, grab it around, make sure it's not twisted, and then just loop it around once, and there we go. And while I'm doing that, I'm doing the other hand as well. And what I like to do also is when it's tight, is roll the bar back while keeping the strap in place, and you can see it tightened up right there. So that tightens up and gives you a good link to it. You could put your thumb around, or you could do thumbless, whatever works for you. So now I'm going to talk about wrist wraps. Now I got these cheap on Amazon.com. I don't see the point in having expensive wraps unless you're very competitive. The only complaint I have about these is they're very stretchy. They're not very stiff. But for me, I tighten them all the way to their end, so they're stiff for me. What I like to do with wrist wraps is grab it like this. You could put your thumb through if it works for you, and there's other ones that have a different loop. Ninja mentioned those in the podcast that we talked about lifting equipment. But you could put your thumb in there. Typically, I like to just grab it like that in my thumb and have the loop up and all the Velcro and everything on the back side so it's outside, and that's how you know which one to use. So what I do there is I grab it there around my thumb, wrap it around my wrist so that it covers my pinky finger like that. And obviously if you have longer fingers, you'll be covering more of your fingers. If you have shorter fingers, you'll be covering less. But I just like to have it so that it's tight around my wrist and down my forearm a tiny bit too, and on my hand, so that it's not only on the wrist. And then I wrap it around lower and then right back to the center, cross, and now that's wrapped. And you could see it comes up on my hand on the front and back. This part you can move out of the way for when you grab the bar. It just makes it more comfortable. And so these are nice. This is a perfect wrap right here. My wrist can barely move. If I had tighter wraps, they would be able to move much less. So that's a perfect wrap right there. Now I'll show you what a lot of people do with these that I don't think is great. So a lot of people will put the thumb loop on and they'll just start wrapping it in the same spot over their wrist. So you see a lot of people will have it like that, just over their wrist, and maybe they take the thumb loop off, and that does nothing except squeezes the tendons in your wrist. So if you're using this, I've seen people use this for deadlifting, and that's not a bad idea because it'll help you hold your grip better. But other than that, if you're using this for any pressing, it's not doing much because your wrist can still move. It's only around the bones here, not the actual joint. So you want to make sure you have it over the joint so that it supports it well. So now I'm going to talk about lifting belts. Now, we touched on belts a good amount in the podcast, so go check that out if you haven't yet. Now, this belt here is my belt that I use. It's a Gym Reapers 10mm belt, I believe. It's simple, cost effective, it works well. Levers are basically necessary. I would say stay away from anything that doesn't have a lever unless you're getting something simpler like this Rogue belt for beginners. And this also works for accessories, which we talk about a lot in the podcast, so go check that out definitely. But this belt is basically a beginner nylon belt. If you're an experienced lifter, you could use this for accessories, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's not going to do you much. Now, this belt is leather and it has a lever, which is basically the rule that I follow when recommending belts or getting a belt. I would not get anything without a lever because then you're wasting so much energy strapping it on and you're not going to be able to get it as tight as this. Now, when adjusting a belt, you unscrew it there and screw it back in where you want it to be. I wouldn't do it too tight because you don't need it very tight. That's just going to mess with you more. It's going to dig into your ribs and make it more comfortable. Unless you're a very experienced lifter and lifting huge weights, you're not going to need it very tight. You're just going to want some support, and that will help work your core too, because if it's too tight, you're going to lose out on some of the activation in your core. You're obviously going to get some activation in your core while wearing a belt or not wearing a belt, but you're going to lose out on some if it's too tight. So a belt can help with beginner lifters to help engage the core because you'll feel it engaging more by having something to push against when you're using lighter weights and not going for big PRs. But for rep work, this helps extend your endurance when going. You could get more reps too. I like to use it generally for my later sets. If I'm doing anything more than 3 or 4 sets, I won't use it for the first 2 or 3. If I'm doing 3 sets, I'll typically not have a belt for the first unless it's a very heavy. Then I'll put it on unlatched for the second, and then I'll latch it for the third. And that's if I'm doing a lot of rep work. If I'm working at a top set with 2 declining back down sets, I'll strap it for the first, latch it, all good. And then the other 2, I'll do it unlatched or no belt at all. So how to use a belt? It's pretty simple. If you have one of these with a lever, you just put it around your body. I like to place this latch right over the front here so it doesn't pinch any skin. Put it on like that and you're good, and then you just tighten it. I can't do it right now because I have a sweatshirt on, so it would be way too tight for me. But that's typically it. That's what it looks like. Now, everyone has a different preference of where they like to have it. You'll typically see Olympic lifters have it around their hips, just covering the lower part of their core because they have extremely strong cores. Some people like it higher up. I typically like it right in the middle just to give me good overall support because I don't have an exceptionally strong core and my core isn't weak, so it's proportional to my strength. A belt like this is simple, Velcro. You put it around the same way, just have that part on the back, put it through the loop, then you basically just crank it and tighten it. And this you could get pretty tight too if you crank hard and put it like that and it stays. It's easy. You don't have to worry about a prong and a loop like a typical belt. Yeah, so like I said, these can be used for accessories. I use these for my strongman cardio because I don't need it super tight restricting my breathing, but I do like to have a little bit of something there to support my core when I'm doing a lot of long endurance, heavy weight, moving stuff, pulling the truck, like stuff out there. You've probably seen videos of me. I have videos in the past. You could go check that out, Strongman Days. But yeah, this belt comes in handy for that. Otherwise, I typically use my lever belt for squats, deadlift, and all the above. So I'm going to touch real quick on knee sleeves because I don't have wraps. I don't think they're necessary for most people unless you are very competitive with equipped lifting, which is a very small section of people that go to the gym. Knee sleeves are very helpful for a lot of people. Now they're in no way necessary. I've lifted for 5 years without them, and I just got them recently because I was doing a lot of volume-based squat training, so I like to have a bit more support on my knees while I'm getting more exhausted. So basically they just add a little bit of compression on the joint and they make it feel warm and just like something's there helping it. They give it a tiny bit of spring out the bottom, not much at all. If you're with heavy weight, you're probably not going to notice. I typically feel it when I'm doing my rep work and I'm starting to get more exhausted at the bottom. But if I'm doing a 1 rep max, definitely don't feel it that much. So these helpful for a lot of people, not necessary. We touched on them a tad bit in the podcast, but here's something we did not touch in the podcast is dip belt, which is something that I think would be very helpful for a lot of people to have if your gym doesn't have one. And these, I love this thing for a lot of accessory work. I use this for specifically calf raises and belt squats, which I use on my cable machine. I don't do a lot of weighted pull-ups or weighted dips or anything like that. I don't do a lot of pull-ups or dips in general. It's just not part of my programming. But yeah, this comes in handy for more than you would think. So definitely recommend one of these if you want to level up your training. So I'm going to touch on a few other things that might be helpful for a lot of lifters. If you lift at a public gym and they don't let you have chalk, but they let you have liquid chalk, spider chalk, definitely the best one out there. It's got pine tar in it, so when you put it on your hand, you can feel it a tiny bit tackier than normal. Even just for me touching this thing on the outside, because I've touched this after having the chalk on my hands are a bit tacky now. So this helps a lot, and it also stays on your hands the entire workout. You put it on once and it's fine. It might start to fade out, like you won't see it as much, but it still has that grip. Smelling salts, they're not necessary at all. I mean, if you're big into lifting and want to add something that's more fun to it, I can recommend these. A lot of people have some health concerns with them, but personally I haven't had any problems. Yeah, they burn your nose, but it's ammonia. It's the same stuff you clean your house with, so I don't see the issue with that. Back on the topic of chalk, this is just a chalk bag that I found on Amazon. It's just basically, I guess, just a bag that lets the chalk through it. So I filled this up once. I've had it for a year and a half, and it lasts a while with the chalk inside it, and I just refill it with the spider chalk that I have in my bucket, and it works well. This is easy to just grab, rub your hands, and now you got chalk on your hands. Good light coating for when I'm doing bench and stuff, or squat and stuff like that. For deadlift, I typically grab a bar to put chalk. And the last thing we'll talk about today is something that I highly recommend as well. Fat grips. These things are incredible. You put them on the bar, just easy enough, slip on, and now it's the width of an axle. Same width, actually a bit thicker over here than the end of the barbell, but these I would definitely recommend for everybody because they really work grip. It adds variation to your training and just makes it much more fun. So that was a quick video on lifting equipment. If you guys have any questions or would like me to touch on any other kinds of equipment like bands or chains or anything like that, or attachments for cables, I can make a separate video about all that stuff. But let me know down in the comments, like this video, subscribe, and we'll be back with more later. We'll see you guys soon.